So when we talk about cannabis being sold as a pharmaceutical dosage form, I like to use a good example of someone who's been around for a while, which is Bedrocan. Bedrocan is the supplier to the Office of Medical Cannabis in the Netherlands. They've also supplied to multiple countries within Europe, Germany, and several others. And this is often what is used as the pharmaceutical standard. Not to necessarily say it will always work in this context, but if we're looking to export under Section 22C1B license, which is the medical license for export, that is often discussed separate from the hemp research permits, this is often the level of quality that needs to be met for successful export. And I would like to explain the COA and what is being considered here, because it would help to clarify the difference between the different grades. Here, the product is obviously floss, which is another word for inflorescence or flower. For hemp flowers, you can see the strength of the dosage form being the THC content of 22%, cannabidiol under 1%. The dosage form is flowers. It's a 5-gram container. This has got a batch number for the traceability purposes. It's got a date when it was harvested, who harvested it, if they applied gamma irradiation, which is perhaps a contentious point, but what was the dose, who applied it, who was the packager for that product, which lab did the testing, and then this is specifically around the testing. And for those who aren't familiar, typically a pharmaceutical product, and if we're going to refer to this form of cannabis as a pharmaceutical product, there's a monograph that gets pushed or put out by a medical regulator that defines the testing requirements. So this is the Dutch monograph, and I'll always happily share that with anyone who asks. So just send me an email, I'll gladly pass it along. But it shows things, appearance, how is the specification defined, what is the results? If we look at identity, foreign materials, so looking for insects, any kind of undue residues, the fineness of the material. Then we start to look at things like the micro contaminants. So there we have to follow a test that's defined by the European Pharmacopoeia because it's a Dutch monograph. And then it looks for things like total microbes that are growing on the flower. Again, this is medical grade and not necessarily in the recreational or alternate markets. It goes through these different pharmacopoeias that are specified. It goes through the testing of aflatoxins, which specific pharmacopoeias to follow, the limits that they test for. In terms of pesticides, this is a really important point, and I'd like to touch on it because I don't feel there's much value in using a Canadian pesticide list or a Californian pesticide list or an Oregon pesticide list when we have our own use of pesticides locally that are well defined within the food export market and even the wine export market, where we should really look at what pesticides are common and prevalent in South Africa, define that pesticide list, and have a medical authority release that pesticide list so we can then assure offtake internationally that those are the pesticides that are most common, we test for them, and we can include additional pesticides that may be on a Californian, Oregon, or Canadian list, but we should do it with cause. We shouldn't just apply international standards without context of local understanding. And this is a specific chapter that refers to that. On the next page, the last page of the COA from Bedrocan, which was in September earlier this year, this example, we look at the presence of heavy metals. It's important in terms of especially concentrating the product. If you were to take it to extraction, this is just for flour. Here, the main method is an ICP-MS test, drying of the flour to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate too significantly after release. And I'm not going to get too technical, but usually this is signed off, approved by a regulator, and it goes into a dosage form with the right labeling requirements. And this is a prescription product.